What's the difference between this rock and Miss America? One of them's hell hot, and the other one's a nuclear engineer. Nah, she's alright. So I went to the Nuclear for Australia event, which is currently touring around the country. I wanted to figure out where I stand on this issue. To make up my mind, I set out to answer 3 simple questions. Is it safe? What happens to the nuclear waste? Is it economical? This is probably everyone's first question. Statistically, yes. There are only 6 industries safer than the nuclear industry, and that list includes accounting. You're statistically at greater risk working at a grocery store than being a nuclear engineer. The most dangerous jobs in America include pilots and trash collectors, but I've never worried about their lives. But here's the thing, one nuclear meltdown can massively skew those numbers. So while statistics normally comfort me, it's not working this time. Normally when we assess risk, we use a 5x5 risk matrix, which compares the likelihood of an event against the severity. We've all heard of Chernobyl and Fukushima, but did you know there have been 28 nuclear meltdowns in the past 71 years? Probably not, so here's a list with the number of deaths. In many cases, it's 0. So how does this fit into the risk matrix? The likelihood of a meltdown is extremely low, and stringent safety protocols have kept fatalities lower still. But again, that somehow doesn't feel entirely reassuring. That brings me to the Peltzman effect, named after economist Sam Peltzman. The idea that perceived danger makes people more cautious, ironically making things safer. Nuclear power is a prime example. Its dangerous reputation has driven some of the strictest safety protocols worldwide. Interestingly, the reverse is also true. When seatbelts were introduced, people started driving faster and taking slightly more risk, ironically offsetting some of the safety of the seatbelt. Just goes to show there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And in the case of nuclear, its scary reputation might be the thing that's keeping us safe. Meet Nate Smith, Managing Director and CEO of TELUS, a company that manages Australia's most hazardous materials, including low-level nuclear waste. Right now, he's answering 3 questions. Where does the nuclear waste go? Is it dangerous? And how long does it last?
Look, right now it's stored in hospital basements. It's all over Australia, hundreds of different places. It's stored at Lucas Heights.
He goes on to say that it's stored underground. That's the answer. Low-level radioactive waste is stored in near-surface disposal facilities, and high-level radioactive waste is stored in deep geological repositories. They cover it in concrete, put it in a 40-gallon drum and bury it, making Australia kind of perfect because we don't have earthquakes. Is it dangerous? Nate doesn't seem worried. He trusts the safety protocols in place.
Everyone here, there's chemical waste that moves every day on these roads that I'd argue is a little bit more challenging than low-level radioactive material, which is like gloves and PPE. You talk about, I know Jazz used to do this back in the day, ammonium nitrate, right? Mixes with diesel and you have a bomb. Mercury, PFAS, forever chemicals, that stuff never disappears. Low-level radioactive material and high-level waste, it does have a half-life where eventually throughout geological time it becomes inert.
Think of it this way, most things are dangerous until you take proper precautions. Swimming with sharks, dangerous, unless you're in a cage. Rock climbing, risky, unless you're harnessed to a rope. With gloves, PPE, proper handling procedures, even nuclear waste isn't that dangerous. And how long does radioactive waste last? Low-level waste, 100 years. Intermediate level waste, up to 10,000. And high-level waste can be thousands to millions of years. At the end of its life cycle, it becomes no more dangerous than an ordinary rock. But I've got one more question. Can nuclear be reused? During the event, someone brought up molten salt reactors. Advanced reactors that can actually use nuclear waste as fuel. MSRs dissolve fuel into molten salt, which also acts as a coolant. They operate at higher temperatures, offering several benefits. Increased safety, greater efficiency, and flexibility with fuel types, including uranium, thorium, plutonium, and yes, nuclear waste. And here are 2 more cool facts that I learned from that night about nuclear waste. If you use nuclear power for your entire life, the waste that you'd produce could fit inside a Coke can. And fact number 2, since the 1990s, nuclear energy has consistently produced around about 20% of the US's electricity. All the nuclear waste produced in the last 30 years could fit inside a single supersized Walmart. Do you know how many Walmarts there are in the US? They could do with one less. Nuclear power plants have some of the highest upfront costs, between $6 to $9 billion per reactor. And they take about 5 to 10 years to build due to specialized materials, regulatory approvals, extensive safety measures, and that's not including the site preparation. But once operational, they are economical. Uranium is inexpensive, requires infrequent refueling, and plants run uninterrupted, unlike wind or solar. Maintenance costs are also lower than fossil fuel plants. The takeaway here is that each energy source has its strengths and weaknesses. With lifespans of 40 to 80 years, investors can recover their costs, provided they're patient. But what you really want to know is, how much is my electricity going to cost? Nuclear power plants cost $60 to $100 per megawatt hour. And here's the others for comparison. Keep in mind, these figures are estimates with wide ranges. Reports often reflect biases even unintentionally. For example, the CSIRO's Levelized Cost of Electricity report isn't consumer focused, it's for producers.
It's the cost of electricity generation. It is a report for people that have a lot of money and want to invest in power production. So it's not a report for us as consumers. It does not tell us what our power bill is going to result in.
Levelized cost of electricity factors in all costs: construction, operations, end of life, and electricity generated in order to create a figure that is fair to compare across different energy sources. It's how we make sure we're doing an apples to apples comparison. I'm still dubious about the cost of nuclear energy, but what I can tell you is that France generates about 70 to 75% of its electricity from nuclear power. They even export this energy to countries like Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, which are often held up as renewable energy champions. In reality, they rely on French nuclear power for part of their energy mix. The cost of energy impacts every purchase you make, so if the cost of living is important to you, you should care about your country's energy policy, because the two are inextricably entwined. If you can bring down the cost of energy by just a cent or two, then the cost of groceries goes down as well. One of the things I dislike about the nuclear energy debate is how it's often framed as a competition against wind and solar, like we have to choose one over the others. I did it only moments ago. Nuclear energy shouldn't compete with wind and solar. If it's going to be in the mix, it should complement them. Just as you wouldn't invest all your money in one stock, relying on a single energy source isn't wise. We should probably diversify. That way, if one source has a bad day, like the wind doesn't blow, the sun doesn't shine, or the power plant melts down, we still have other systems keeping the beer cold. Silicon Valley's massive power needs are driving the recent push for nuclear.
The tech companies are needing this clean, reliable energy for their data centers, right? We've actually seen 3 nuclear reactors now in America that recently decommissioned. They announced that they're coming back online because electricity demand is growing that much in the next couple of years in terms of AI, power demand, and data centers, and things like that. One Google search using AI takes 10 times as much electricity as it did before without AI.
Interestingly, Australia already has a nuclear reactor just south of Sydney, the Opal reactor in Lucas Heights, operating since 2006. It replaced the HIFAR reactor, which ran from 1958. Opal produces medical isotopes critical for cancer detection and treatment. It's funny though, due to these 2 pieces of legislation, which ban Australia from using nuclear energy, Opal's excess heat can't be used to generate electricity. It's just wasted. If nuclear energy policy matters to you, here's where the political parties stand. I lean toward lifting the ban, but I'm open to changing my mind. For me, the most convincing arguments would be centered around the economics. Remember, you were born free.
So I've just been made aware by the Herald Sun that apparently our event in Morwell was a massive failure. The funny thing is, we're in Melbourne at the moment. We haven't even been to Morwell. So thank you to the Herald Sun. Apparently it was a PR stunt. Former Miss America Grace Stanke fails to win over Morwell with pro-nuclear pitch. The only issue is she actually hasn't made that pitch at all. It goes to show what we're dealing with in this nuclear debate. Funny article from the Herald Sun.